What's going on, GOAT Format Duelists? I wanted to get you all a first look at the results of GOAT Format Worlds, as well as talk a little bit about why some people are kind of upset about these results, as well as the format of the tournament. So just right off the bat, I'll say the format of the tournament was really weird. So it was Swiss rounds, which is fine. Like, I think they're kind of pros and cons to Swiss versus double elim. But 74 people entered, and then they had 7 rounds of Swiss, totally normal. But then they cut to top 32, which I think is really bizarre because you're having almost half of the people who entered making the top cut, which almost defeats the purpose of the Swiss rounds, right? Like, you have people who went 4-3 in Swiss making the top cut. And then additionally, it was timed, which I think there are a lot of disadvantages to doing this, but I won't get into it in this video. Basically, there were 50-minute rounds. That changes the dynamics a bit of like what card choices specifically are good. Going into this tournament, like if you look at the past month of results, Solemn Judgment was becoming a lot more meta. But you'll see that like a lot of these chaos decks that top tier weren't playing Solemn Judgment. Like, some were, but a lot fewer than you would otherwise expect. And that is partially due to the time constraints, I would imagine. What people are kind of, not feeling too good about, I counted, and I think 19 out of these 32 decks are what people would call Chaos Turbo, right? Sort of the standard Thunder Dragon Chaos list. We'll look at the list of the winner of the tournament, first place, Ludovico Rizzo. Monster lineup, very standard for your Chaos deck. Traps, standard-ish, but again, you'll notice no Solemn Judgments, main or side, right? I think that's partially due to time. So, like, again, last month, you saw, like, a lot of main deck Solemn Judgments and main deck Jargreeds. The idea is I can sort of set my whole hand to play around my opponent's Trap Dust Shoot. Here, we don't see that strategy. Like, yes, there's a few things that are different. We have like the card destruction main deck, which is not good in the mirror, but a lot better in the aggro matchups. One Mind Control in the main for the mirror. That's not exactly anything that revolutionary. People have been doing that for a while now. A lot of people don't like Chaos Turbo, the deck. Like, they don't like playing it. They don't like playing against it. If the meta gets to the point where it's just all Chaos mirrors, it's just all mirrors of this deck, are people still going to want to play GOAT format? Now, that's something I can't answer. I'm not a mind reader, nor can I see into the future. Some of these results are due to what people entered with. This deck, this Chaos Turbo deck, this is the third place Chaos Turbo deck, almost certainly the most popular deck in the tournament. Just pure probability would say that, hey, if 40% of people in the tournament are using deck A, then deck A will be about 40% of whatever the top cut is, right? So that's kind of what we saw here. But here you'll see, more than half of the top cut was these Chaos decks. So any way you slice it, Chaos Turbo did well in this tournament, right? It got good results. Both these players, Marcus Hayden and Ludovico Rizzo, they went 5-2 in Swiss, which is fine. But like in the case of the winner, Ludovico Rizzo, if this was a normal Swiss tournament, 74 entrants, you would normally cut to top 8. And this player was not in the top 8. So in a normal Swiss tournament, this player could never win the tournament because he wouldn't make top cut. I'm not trying to take away from the accomplishment of getting first, by the way. I'm not saying that Ludovico Rizzo didn't deserve to win or something like that. I'm just saying that the unique nature of this tournament affected what the results were. That's all I'm saying. We did have Shifty getting in second with Earth Aggro. Now, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw what the top 32 decks were, I'm like, God, oh God, please let the grand finals just have no Chaos Turbo decks in it, just to, send a message to the player base about what is or isn't viable. But of course that didn't happen. Of the top 3 decks, first and third were these Chaos Turbo decks. This Earth deck was second. It's definitely interesting that Earth did so well. I don't think anyone was expecting that. We see no Giant Rats main deck. Earth, it's like on paper, you feel like, oh, this deck is trash. A bunch of Goblin Attack Forces and DD Assailants. Like, how does this deck win? But it does. Like, it just does. It just goes to show that sometimes what looks good on paper isn't always what the best deck is. So yeah, congrats to Shifty, congrats to Ludovico, of course. But, I want to sort of talk about the problem here. I can go on all day trying to explain why, give you my theories on, oh, here's why, decks that looked like this and this did so well. I could explain that all day, but it doesn't really matter that much why these decks did so well. What matters is that they did and what it means going forward. I think these results aren't very good for the perception of GOAT format. Imagine there is a hypothetical player, right? This player is saying, hey, I'm tired of current format Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to try some sort of past format. I'm thinking maybe it's going to be GOAT format, maybe it's going to be Edison format, maybe it's going to be something else, maybe it's going to be plant format. I want to pick up some past Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Now, imagine that player comes and looks at these results, and they go, oh, the format is just all of these Chaos decks with Thunder Dragon in them. That doesn't seem that interesting. Why would I want to play this? I mean, I think that is a problem. And the sort of anti-Chaos players seem pretty vocal about their dislike of these various decks. And yet, everyone still seems to play Chaos. So clearly the perception is that, oh, I wish Chaos wasn't the meta, but I'm entering a tournament tomorrow and I think it's the best deck, so I have to play it. Now, I personally would disagree with that. I don't think it's the best deck. I think you take a list like this, Paede's deck, I think this deck does well against Chaos. Clearly this deck does well against Chaos. Even something like Burn, I think does well against Chaos, especially if the tournament is timed, needless to say. So I think there are a lot of decks that can do quite well against Chaos. This deck, I think, could also do fine against Chaos. And yet people don't seem to play them. Again, that could be for a number of reasons. Based on my experience of playing GOAT format, to me, the thing that I don't like about Chaos, it's not that I think it's too good, because I actually don't think it's too good on average. The problem is that it gets a lot of sort of effortless free wins, in the sense that, I have some people that complain about, oh, my opponent opened Thunder Dragon, Graceful Charity, how am I supposed to beat that? Well, of course the answer is you can, especially if you don't go on tilt and play well, but you're obviously not favored to beat that. And there will be some games where your opponent opens something like that and you're just like, oh, this is dumb, I couldn't beat it. So, if you were to build a deck, like again, we'll take this GOAT control deck. Most matchups in GOAT format are pretty close to 50-50. There aren't really any 80-20 matchups. There certainly aren't any 90-10 matchups. They're just matchups that are close to even, and then they're matchups where, okay, this deck maybe is 60-40 versus this other deck. But if you were to play this deck against, say, Ludovico's deck, now we can debate like what the matchup is, but it's going to be close to 50-50, right? You play, say, 100 matches of this deck versus Ludovico's deck. Maybe Ludovico's deck will win 55 matches, and this deck will win 45. If I had to guess, we'll just throw that out there. The issue is that the games that Chaos Turbo wins against GOAT Control are a lot more effortless than the games that GOAT Control will win against Chaos Turbo. The GOAT Control player really has to think through their plays carefully, sort of grind out the advantage, figure out, oh, is this the best time to meta? Is this the best time to drop my Tsukiyomi? Should I end phase the Decree, or should I wait to chain it to something? Should I Zaborg now? Should I Injection Fairy Lily now? Is the risk reward on creature swap good? They've got all these different decisions to think about, whereas the Chaos Turbo player can just go like, oh, I opened whatever, oh, Thunder Dragon, Potigree, Dekochi. Like, my play is fairly obvious. So the actual gameplay with your standard Chaos deck is not particularly interesting a lot of the time. Now, sometimes it can be. Again, we play that hypothetical matchup out, or even if it's just a Chaos Mirror, right? You play a bunch of Chaos Mirrors, and there will be some games that are very close and very interesting. And on this channel, I feature those games all the time. Like, oh, hey, look at this play here. But a lot of them aren't. It's a bit of a judgment call as far as how much bullshit is too much. But I think for a lot of players, the answer is that we are at a point where the bullshit is too much. Now, the cycle that we've been going through for about the past year, and this is the cycle that I think will continue, is that it's sort of this Chaos and Warrior meta. By the way, I think Warriors are fine and healthy in the GOAT format meta. So you have these Chaos and these Warrior decks. And what happens is there are plenty of tech for both of those different matchups, like on both sides. Like Chaos can play cards for Chaos, Warriors can play cards for Chaos, Warriors can play cards for the Warrior Mirror. And what you'll see happening is that you'll have 1 month where like Chaos wins a bunch, like this tournament, and then the Warrior decks will go, okay, we need to play more Mind Controls and Mystic Swordsman level 2s. And then Warriors will win a bunch. And then what will happen is, the warrior players will say, oh, well, warriors are winning a bunch now. I need to take out those mystic swordsman level 2s and put Zumbira of the Darks. And then chaos will go, hey, all these warrior players have taken out all their mystic swordsman level 2s, and now they've started playing Zumbira of the Dark. So we can, make our comeback and beat them. And you kind of have this sort of back and forth cycle where, you have these cards like Mind Control that are good against chaos but not good against warriors. You have cards like Zumbira the Dark that are good against warriors, not so great against chaos. Mystic Swordsman level 2, good against chaos, not so good against warriors. And then you have cards like Gravekeeper Spy, of course, that are good against both. And yeah, you kind of see this sort of back and forth thing going where players have to constantly evaluate like, oh, is this the day where I'm going to main deck the Mind Controls or main deck the Zumbira the Darks? For some people, that's interesting. For some people, they're probably just bored out of their mind by that. But as far as the solution, I don't think players are really going to start playing different decks anytime soon. And again, it doesn't really have so much to do with what's good. It's largely due to preference. Patrick Chapin, the Magic player, in his book, he would sort of write about this sort of self-reinforcing loop where people think a deck is good, so more people play it. Because more people play the deck wins more tournaments. Because the deck wins more tournaments, more people play the deck, right? It's called it's called information cascades. That's what he would call it. And I think that cascade is kind of going to continue, where a lot of the people are just going to keep playing these same decks because they think that is the only option. Yes, you're going to have these few people playing decks like this, or decks like this, or decks like, Burn or whatever. But unless one of these decks like goes on a rampage, like if Reasoning Gate just wins like 3 tournaments in a row, maybe that'll change the meta a bit. Or, even something like, say, Rescue Cat or Burn or Earth Aggro, actually. If Earth Aggro wins 3 tournaments in a row, or maybe even gets second in 3 tournaments in a row, okay, maybe this kind of becomes more the meta and shakes things up. That's possible, but it would take something very extreme like that. It would take a very extreme set of results to really change the meta significantly, because most people, they're just going to play whatever they want to play, and it's just kind of end of discussion. You see certain people, again, I'm not picking on anyone, but like Purple Drunk, been playing Chaos Turbo for God knows how many years. He's not going to change his mind anytime soon, right? He's not going to take this deck and go, oh no, I'm going to play Panda Burn now. Here's what I think needs to happen for the meta to evolve in such a way that it's not just all Chaos Turbo decks. If we had comprehensive matchup data, every deck versus every deck. How often does Goat Control beat Chaos? How often does Chaos beat Warriors? How often does Burn beat Goat Control? The whole shebang. If we had that, I think in the data, we might be able to see what Chaos Turbo's strengths and weaknesses are. And it might not be what we expect. Like, maybe we do find, like, oh, wow, based on the last month of tournament results, Earth Aggro was beating Chaos like 65% of the time. And I'm just like throwing hypothetical numbers out there. But if we saw that might make people switch, right? That might make some Chaos Turbo decks switch to Earth, as an example. If we had thousands and thousands of samples to show that, oh, hey, look, Chaos Turbo has this specific weakness, it can be exploited. Say, on the other hand, oh, actually, Chaos Turbo just beats everything on average, which some people speculate. I don't think that's true, by the way. I would be really confident that if we got that data, we would find plenty of losing matchups for Chaos. But if we looked at the data and we saw that that was not the case, that, oh, actually, Chaos Turbo just crushes everything, then I think it honestly would be time to talk about some modifications to the format. I think you would start small, right? Saying, oh, maybe if we ban Delinquent Duo, Chaos Turbo gets a little worse. Or you say, maybe if we limit Chaos Sorcerer to 1, that makes Chaos Turbo a little worse. Again, I'm not really trying to suggest anything specific here. Just that I think that would be the fork in the road, is that, okay, we look at the data. If Chaos Turbo has a bunch of losing matchups, then we realize that, okay, the deck isn't too good, it's just player preference. But then if we look and see this deck actually does just crush everything, then something would need to be done. Now, as far as getting that data, there are a couple ways of going about that. There is a tool called Yu-Gi-Oh! Scope, which actually looks at current format data and says like these decks are winning the most, these aren't. It's somehow, synchronized with Dueling Book to sort of automatically look at all the matches and gather data about which decks, which cards are winning the most. Now that tool that works for current format, I imagine, they could either add on to that tool to also scrape the GOAT format matches, or someone else could, come up with their own tool. And I will say, of course, I am working on my own GOAT format simulator. It is also called GOAT Duels. And, I hope it'll be available by the end of this year. I'm sorry that it's taken longer than normal. Part of this simulator is that we are going to be able to gather data on matchups. We're going to be able to gather all different kinds of data. It's going to be built directly into the simulator. You're not going to need some separate tool, go to some other website. And, I think that's one of the things that'll make it a good simulator. So to be honest, after seeing these Worlds results, I'm now a little more motivated to really crack down and finish the work on that simulator, because I think that specific tool is something that GOAT format needs. We do need to be able to look at the matchup data and confidently say to players, oh no, actually Chaos Turbo is not a problem. It is just your perception that it is a problem. So I kind of said a lot. Let me know what you all think in the comments.